Welcome back to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever felt, just completely trapped inside your own head, like you can't escape your own thoughts? Today, we're exploring something that affects pretty much all of us at some point. We're going to look at how overthinking actually creates this invisible, heavy prison right in our own minds. It's a fascinating concept, and we're unpacking it through an idea known as the heavy glass, and looking at the true burden of overthinking.
So I want to ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the more you think about a problem, the bigger it seems to become? I really want you to sit with that for a second. Think about a time when you had, just a minor issue, maybe a slightly awkward conversation, or a tiny mistake at work. You thought about it once, and it was just mildly annoying. You thought about it 10 times, and boom, it ruined your entire afternoon. You thought about it 50 times, and suddenly it felt like your whole life was falling apart. Why exactly does that happen to us?
Well, a philosopher once put it perfectly. They said, "The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master." And honestly, this brilliantly hits the nail on the head for our core theme today. There's this deeply profound truth we have to face. Most people don't actually suffer because of their tangible, physical problems. Instead, they suffer because they think about those problems over and over and over again. The issue isn't the reality around us. The issue is that sometimes the prison isn't external at all. It's built entirely inside our own minds.
To really wrap our heads around how this works, let's look at this brilliant little narrative called the heavy glass parable. So the story starts with a man who is desperately seeking peace from an exhausted mind. He goes to visit this old, wise master and he says, "Master, I just can't find peace. My mind never stops. I'm constantly thinking about my past, my future, my mistakes, what other people think of me. I am just absolutely exhausted." And honestly, I think we can all relate to that guy, right? We've all felt that spinning wheel of thoughts that just refuses to slow down.
So how does the master respond to this deep existential exhaustion? Well, he doesn't launch into some long, complicated philosophical lecture. Instead, the old master simply smiled. He picked up a totally regular glass of water, handed it to the troubled man, and gave him one very simple instruction. "Hold this for a few minutes," he said. The man took the glass. It was just water. Nothing special, right? He held it, probably wondering what on earth this basic, mundane task had to do with his racing mind and his endless worries.
And here is where the lesson really unfolds over time. Let's walk through this timeline together. After a few minutes, the master asks, "How heavy is the glass?" The man replies, "Not heavy at all," which makes perfect sense. But then the master says, "Okay, hold it for 1 hour." Now imagine doing that. After an hour, his arm really began to ache. You can imagine the tension starting to build up in his shoulder. Then the master looks right at him and says, "Now, hold it all day." The man actually laughed. He said, "That's impossible. My arm would become completely numb."
Now, what's really interesting here is the sharp contrast. The master nodded at the man's realization and decoded the lesson for him. He pointed out that the actual physical weight of the glass never changed. It didn't magically gain more water. But the burden of the glass, the physical toll it took on his body, became heavier and heavier the longer you held it, until it was literally unbearable. The master paused and told him, "Problems are the exact same way. Thinking about them for a short while, totally natural, but carrying them all day, every day, that will eventually destroy your peace."
Which brings us to the core message here. What is overthinking actually doing to us? We're shifting now from a fable to our daily reality, because this isn't just a neat little metaphor, it's a direct mirror reflecting our everyday lives. We really need to examine what actually happens when we refuse to put our own glasses down. Look at how these harsh consequences stack up. This is exactly what overthinking does to us. First off, it turns small fears into giant monsters. A tiny comment from a coworker suddenly spirals into this massive fear of losing your entire career. It creates problems that literally don't even exist yet. It steals your sleep. You know the feeling, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., desperately trying to solve tomorrow's puzzles, right? It steals your daily happiness. And most tragically, it steals the present moment. We walk around carrying regrets from the past that just don't matter anymore, and we fear things in the future that never even happen. We are essentially holding a glass full of ghosts, and it is completely exhausting us.
So, why do we keep doing it? Well, it's because of a really powerful illusion. You see, overthinking tricks us into believing we're solving a problem. We feel productive when we worry. We feel like, hey, I'm doing the necessary work to protect myself. But the reality? We're actually just repeating the exact same thoughts in different forms. The future remains entirely uncertain. The past cannot be changed. Yet our minds just keep needlessly replaying both, accomplishing absolutely nothing but wearing out our emotional muscles. Let's move to and see how this builds into a real solution. We've identified the absolute chaos of overthinking, but how do we find a solid, grounded foundation? How do we actually train ourselves to put the glass down? To answer this, we can turn to one of the greatest minds in history.
Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman philosopher and emperor, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Just think about how comforting that is. True peace does not come from controlling everything around you. It doesn't come from planning for every possible disaster or obsessing over what people might think. Peace comes from accepting that not everything can be controlled. Your true power? It's entirely internal.
Which brings us to the core takeaway of today's explainer. Overthinking doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. We so often convince ourselves that if we just think about a problem long enough, we're going to build this perfect shield against it. But the reality is completely different. Sometimes the answer is not to think more. Sometimes the answer is simply to let go. To learn when it is time to just stop thinking.
So, if your mind is filled with endless worries right now, I want to leave you with this final, unforgettable question. Next time you're caught in a loop, ask yourself honestly, am I actually solving the problem, or am I simply holding the glass for too long?